the three most important verbs in any and every language are be, do, and have, okay? And most people emphasize the verb have. I want a girlfriend. I want to have a nice house. I want to have a nice job. Well, okay, that's all very well and good. But to have things is a consequence of doing things. And people forget that. So I guess the answer to the question is you have to do things that will distinguish you.
This episode is brought to you by Covered.io, an options trading tool that we use to generate extra income to free up time so we can pursue projects like this podcast. This is The Covered Call, the podcast where we explore the journey towards true freedom. In each episode, we bring on guests that have charted their own course towards more freedom, more contentment, and more impact in their lives.
Today with us is Doug Casey. Doug is a legendary speculator, best-selling author, and self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist who spent his life challenging the conventional wisdom. We've come to know him because he's been, frankly, recommended to us from pretty much all the previous podcast guests that we've had on. He's friends with most of them, and he's also acted as, I guess, in almost a mentorship role to many of them. Beyond that, Doug has lived in at least 10 countries, and interestingly, at least one of them doesn't exist anymore, so I want to ask him about that. And he's visited more than 150. Generally, he's embraced a life of freedom and unencumbered thought. He's founded companies, he's written iconic books, and we're just incredibly honored to have you on today, Doug. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Lovis. It's nice to be here. In my case, at the moment, here is Uruguay, where I spend a good part of the year. I have a farm here. Here, I can show it to you.
Nice.
Why tell when you can show? Looking out the window, I don't know if you can see it or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got the telescope too. You must have good stargazing opportunities out there at night.
Yeah, it's pretty good. We're out in the country. We're only 5 miles from the ocean here, but we're about 30 miles from Punta del Este, which is the nearest town of any consequence.
How did you ever pick Uruguay as a destination to live in?
Well, actually, I picked Argentina and basically was living in Argentina and in Buenos Aires. And like any good porteño, that's what you call a resident of Buenos Aires, you don't spend the summer in the city. You go across the Mighty Plate River and you go to the beach in Uruguay. So for years, we would rent different places on the beach in Uruguay, because that's just what you did if you're a porteño. Until finally, I got a call from a real estate broker, happens to be German by a matter of fact, an accident. And he said, I've heard you're here in Uruguay, and I have a piece of property that I think you'd like to buy. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he described it to me, and I said, I don't like the location, forget about it. But he was very insistent, and he said, I'll pick you up and I'll show it to you, you'll fall in love with it, blah, blah, blah. So I went out here and I looked at it, and it's a very nice house on 400 hectares of land, and it's got cattle and all this kind of thing, and it's got its own river, and it's actually quite nice. So I bought it. I didn't need to live on the beach anyway. I never went down to the beach. It's too crowded in the summer.
Hey, Lovis, sounds like that was a good German salesperson.
So
you only find them in South America.
It makes sense that he was not in Germany. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot of Germans actually here in Uruguay and in Argentina, and I think there will be many, many more as time goes on over the next few years, actually, because any European with any sense, I think, will jump off the sinking ship Europe. And
Yeah.
this is the best place to be, I think, because I had to make a decision where to go, because I didn't like the direction the U.S. was going either. Thank God that didn't win this last election, because if she had won, it would have been abandoned ship, because we, we'd be totally in the U.S. But we have a 4-year reprieve, probably, maybe 2 years or maybe 1 year before Trump goes wild. But anyway, I moved to New Zealand first. I went there for the polo, and that was good. But I guess wound up down here in the Southern Cone, which is what we call the southern part of South America.
So, expand on why should people leave Europe, or even like the West in general, right? If we're considering that, I mean, South America is part of the global South, I would say, right? So this is not the West, even though there's Western values, I would assume to some
Yeah.
degree.
Well, South America, each of the countries down here is very different, almost as different as all the countries of Europe are from each other. And I've been to all the countries in South America, including the 3 Guianas, which very few people go to. And if you're interested in South America, the places that I think are most suitable to travel to with an eye to setting up a second residence are, number one, Argentina, especially with the election of Javier Milei as the president. This is unique in world history. It's a huge and dynamic change. Most people just don't understand how important it is. With the election of Milei, that's one. And Uruguay, which is kind of relates to Argentina the way Canada relates to the US, or the way New Zealand relates to Australia, or the way Rhodesia used to relate to South Africa. It's like a little baby brother country. And the southern part of Brazil, because Brazil is really not one country. It's at least 2, probably 3 countries or more. Southern Brazil is very different from northern Brazil. And Chile, which is kind of a strange duck. But anyway, if you want to investigate South America, those are the countries that I'd start with.
Doug, I was listening to a video of yours from, I think, not so long ago, about a month ago, and it sounded like you were in Phuket back then.
Yeah.
Was it a month ago or so now? So just me being from Southeast Asia, how do you think Thailand, or maybe, Phuket, Chiang Mai, how does that compare as a destination to South America?
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Thailand over the years. And as a place to transplant to, after deciding that I wanted, I still have a house in the U.S., a nice place, actually. I used to live in Aspen, Colorado, in the U.S. for, well, God, the last 40 years, frankly. And I liked Aspen, but it's changed a great deal. It used to be the land of hard drugs, soft snow, hard drugs, and casual sex. And that was a good description of Aspen when I was living there. But now it's transformed into a town of class warfare, where the billionaires are driving the multimillionaires out of town because they can't afford it anymore. It's changed, transformed totally. So I left Aspen and I had a ranch there, and sold it, and bought a place on the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, which I like. I feel like a salmon swimming upstream when I go to Virginia, because I spent a lot of my youth growing up in the area around DC and Virginia. Anyway, that's irrelevant to anything. Anyway, so I spend the northern summer in Virginia on the Chesapeake, and the rest of the year here, and travel once in a while. So I,
Phuket was
I,
was it something you do systematically? Like, for example, when you went to Thailand, is that just part of your cycle, or there was something special happening in Thailand this time?
I love Thailand, and we almost moved there. But trouble with Thailand is, or which is, I think, the most desirable of the countries in not just Southeast Asia, but Asia itself, frankly, because it's it has many advantages that I see. Is you can move to Thailand as a Farang, but you're never going to be a Thai, and that can be an advantage to be an outsider. But here in Argentina or Uruguay, you have your choice whether you want to be an insider or an outsider, because this is a land that takes immigrants, and Thailand really doesn't. You're not going to be a Thai unless you're a Thai. Forget about it. So I like to go back there from time to time. So on this jaunt, I spent a week in Phuket and spent a week in Kuala Lumpur, and then spent another week in Sri Lanka. And all three are different and interesting and enjoyable. I'm sure you spent a lot of time in Kuala Lumpur. It's kind of like Singapore on the cheap, if you would, I think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a almost, yeah. Actually, for us, when we travel to Malaysia, we tend to skirt around Kuala Lumpur just because it's just another city. And being in Singapore, we're always in the city anyway. So when we go to Malaysia, we tend to head out to Malacca or go to the highlands, the Genting or Cameron Highlands, just to get a bit of nature. But if we're doing business in Malaysia, then yeah, we're in Kuala Lumpur very often.
Yeah. Well, you got to be somewhere. Okay. So for me, that somewhere is Argentina and Uruguay most of the year. And in the northern summer, it's in Virginia. And
And
if
have you always got this wanderlust bug? Like, have you always been a traveler, or was that something that changed at some point in your life?
I think I've always been that way, quite frankly. And in recent years, I've been able to formulate and crystallize why I've traveled around so much. And that is because if you're a human, it's not a good survival strategy to act like a medieval serf, where you're born in one place and don't go far from where you were born because there might be dragons over the hill. It's not a good survival strategy to act like a potted plant and stay in one place. So, I hate being trapped here on planet Earth. If we were born 100 years or 200 years from now, we might have our options of lots of other places in the solar system. Probably not in the galaxy, but that is yet to be determined. But yeah, I like to branch out.
And when you travel, like I heard one of your interviews where you were talking about being on the Orient Express and you were sharing food with some Roma.
Yeah. Yes,
Right?
we called them gypsies then, and
Yeah.
I still call them gypsies. Perfectly good word. I mean,
Yeah.
this is one of the problems that the West has. We're changing our language to suit other people. It's I think it's inappropriate. They can call themselves Roma. That's fine. You can call them Roma, but historically they've been known as gypsies. Perfectly good word. They
I
may not
didn't.
like it, but I'm sorry they don't like it.
Yeah. I didn't even know that gypsy is not a good word nowadays. I just always thought they were called both.
My sister actually corrected me several times, and I could never remember the other word, like Roma. There's an equivalent to Roma in German. And she's like, no, it's called this. I already forgot again. It's called this and that now. And I'm like, yeah, that. But like, I think it's kind of like, okay, this is a terrible analogy. I shouldn't. But yes, we're actively self-censoring, Doug. You're right. I'm doing it right now.
Yes. In
But
France, there used to be a brand of cigarettes that were roughly equivalent to Camels, except they used that strange French type of tobacco called gitans. And a
Yeah.
gitan is a gypsy. But I question, I haven't been to France for a long time, that they even have gitan cigarettes anymore because gypsy is considered to be inappropriate. In Hong Kong, there used to be a brand of toothpaste
Oh,
called
Darky.
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 Yes, you remember it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's off the market now, right?
No. You know what? It's the same thing. They just changed the logo a little bit. It's still a black and white silhouette, but it's now called Dali. They changed the K to an L.
Ah, so it still shows a black guy with great teeth.
Yeah, but
I'm
they make it seem like it's a black and white picture, so you can't really know for sure that it's a black guy. But yeah, so it went from Darky to Dali. They just changed the K to an L. They still have it in Singapore.
Oh, that's interesting. But there's all kinds of words that are no longer politically correct that you can't use. Like somebody informed me several years ago when I was referring to the Orient. They said, "Oh, you're not supposed to say Orient." I said, "What are you talking about?" It says, "No, that's kind of a pejorative, racist word. You're not supposed to say Orient anymore. You're supposed to say the Far East or something like that." And so I looked into it, and there was this Arab writer. What the hell was his name? He's dead now. That said Orient's inappropriate as a word because it has connotations of the mysterious and the unknown and the backward. So Orient, in referring to the Far East, has been purged from the language. I don't
Oh,
observe.
I did not even know that. And anyway, I thought mysterious and unknown were good things. I'd like to
Yeah.
be a mysterious fella.
Well, it brings up images of Fu Manchu, who was a character in novels written by a guy named Sax Rohmer. And he kind of epitomized all the things about Chinese people that, in fact, listen, even as late as the 70s, there was a rock and roll song said, "Don't screw with Fu Manchu, because if you do, he will make a fool out of you." You can probably Google it and find it. So,
Sounds like a good song. You can still remember the lyrics, huh?
oh yeah,
It was remade into a swing song, actually. I've heard it many times.
you have heard that actually. Good.
Yeah.
Well, apropos of what we talked about earlier before we started this interview, it's that if you're of a different generation now, which did not used to be the case, there's very little overlap between the generations because all of the generations, if you're of a certain age group, you fit into a silo, and there's no mass media, whether it's newspapers or a widely popular variety show. They don't have those anymore. That kind of gives everybody in the society a taste of what other generations and other occupations are doing. So we don't even know each other exists anymore, frankly, if they're not within your silo.
No, it's true. I mean, because if you subscribe to something like Netflix, the algorithms suggesting content to you produce a completely different experience, right? And if it's YouTube, is even more extreme because there's so much more content. So everybody gets to just view stuff that they're interested in. It makes them either equally upset or equally happy, whatever the person's into.
So no, you're quite correct. I was just reading a selection from a horrible book by a horrible person, Yuval Noah Harari, in a book called Nexus. And he was complaining about the fact that the Rohingya, a Muslim group in Burma, have been beaten up and murdered and so forth. And he attributed a lot of that to Facebook. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't.
No, I haven't heard the connection to Facebook. I know the Rohingya having issues in, was it the west of Burma? But,
yes, that's right. And Harari points out that Facebook is interested in getting more people to look at things. And if you direct people or whatever they do towards violence and antagonism, that's a lot more exciting than if you have a direction saying, oh, these Rohingya are just nice people and they're misunderstood. So it tends to direct people towards articles and comments that are the former, not the latter in this case. And, well, that's true. I mean, you got to give people what they want.
So the influence that these platforms have on us is incredible and can almost not be overstated. Especially, I would say the younger, if you're on, the older side of the bell curve or on the really young side of the bell curve, I think the influence is the greatest, because if you're in the middle, then you happen to have grown up with it quite a bit, there's some aspect, I think, of critical thinking that these also skirt around or prohibit developing in the first place, maybe. I'm not sure. But there's what was I going to say? I was going to say something about so most famously, the influence that these algorithms can have on outcomes of elections, for example, is insane. It's a huge margin, and so Facebook never came out and said it straight up, but Zuckerberg did say in this most recent election that he was no longer going to do his nonpartisan donations to certain organizations. I think what he was really saying is they're not going to put their thumb on the scale this time.
Well, of course, in this last election, I don't know, because frankly, all we know is what we read or see on the computer or on the television.
Yeah.
And these things can be altered or faked. And so I'm in a position where I really don't believe anything without investigating it to at least some degree. But
that's the only choice you have. You have to read the sources, right? Like, I noticed that so strongly during the pandemic. If you just read a headline or maybe the first part of an article, but you didn't go to the actual sources, the actual studies they were citing, which I do, and then you read the study and you're like, oh, this actually, the results says something completely different than what the news article was saying it says. But of course, nobody takes the time to actually go and read. And then, of course, that also doesn't, a lot of the studies were also completely meaningless in the first place. So there's also limited value to reading them. But it's tricky.
Of course, and if they're reported, the reporters are overwhelmingly leftist in orientation. So if there's any possible way to interpret it to make them or their editors happy, they do. So it's increasingly tough, and it's not going to get any better very quickly. I trust it will get better, because for the last 4 or 5 or 6 generations, kids that go to school have been indoctrinated in school by left-leaning or actual Marxist teachers. And they hear things for the first time from a person in authority. And of course, that tends to be accepted as truth. And then it's filtered down from there to high schools and grade schools. And it's tough to unlearn things once you have learned them. It's like Mark Twain said, it's not what we don't know that's a problem. It's what we think we know that just ain't so. So I'm rather pessimistic about things in general for the near term for a lot of reasons. And that's one of them.
Would you say traveling, just to beat on that horse again with travel, because I've traveled a lot in my life. I've been very lucky, right? And I noticed that by traveling, it forces me to relearn a lot of things that I thought I already knew for sure. Like you'd go onto a plane. When I was working and traveling to China a lot, for example, before Trump got elected the first time, I think that was when it really hit me. I would go through a European airport, and it didn't matter whichever European airport I was in, there would be a newsstand with maybe 12 to 16 different magazines on there, and everyone would be painting Trump in a, either he's the devil or he's a clown or he's someone stupid, right? And then I would go onto an airplane and land somewhere in Asia. Like I might land in China or in Korea or in Istanbul, right? And then there would still be those newsstands and there would still be those magazines, but it would be different. Suddenly Trump was this competent, scary guy that's going to come and put tariffs on us. We need to be careful. But what was interesting for me was all the different magazines with all the different caricatures had the same message. It just depended on which geographic location you were in, right? And that told me that, hey, everyone's saying that they're the free press, but actually the biggest correlation is your location. It's under which government, this media is being published. You'd be able to roughly tell whether, Trump is a good guy, bad guy, smart guy, stupid guy, just based on where you were. So if people don't travel, then of course they would just slowly gravitate towards what that official narrative is, right?
Makes all the sense in the world. And all their friends have been exposed to the same thing, so they believe the same thing, and you reinforce each other's beliefs just naturally. Yeah. Everybody believes this; it must be right. Yeah, it's quite a problem.
Well, similar.
How will it be solved? I'm not sure.
Jason, a similar thing is your religious belief is also like 90% where you were born, right? That's the strongest influence over what your religious affiliation is. It's just location, and if you never step out of it and you never put yourself in a different room in a different place, you'll never even question it, right? It's because those are the traditions and we must follow them, and that's just it.
It just becomes a way of life, right?
So but Doug, this leads me to one of the questions. You're quite the philosopher, I think. And when you're going your own path in life, how do you know what's right and wrong?
Well, you just mentioned religion, and I don't use religion as a guide. Certainly in the West, religion in general, and Christianity in particular, they're dying institutions. 100 years ago, Europe and America were known as Christendom, but this is no longer the case. People don't go to church. They don't respect these things. I certainly don't. I personally grew up in a cannibalistic death cult. I'm referring to the Catholic Church, of course. But I discarded that long ago. It's not that I think that religion is a bad thing for a culture or a society. Although I've got to say, this is why the Romans had it. They would give cult to the gods, and you didn't have to believe in them, but you had to respect them because they were something that we all held in common. And the stories that they told about the gods, the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid and things like that, pointed out moral virtues. They're all part of that culture. And Christianity changed all of that. Previously, in the ancient world, philosophers decided, or helped you decide, I should say, what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. Then when Christianity took over, the church decided these things for you, and in a dogmatic way, not terribly open for discussion. But the interesting thing is now that religion is being washed away in the West, people don't have any source of reference of what's right and wrong, good or evil. Religion's gone. Maybe it's going to be replaced by Islam, which is a huge mistake. That's like going from the frying pan into the fire, religious-wise. But they don't have philosophy or philosophical discussions about morality, and this is one of the reasons why the West is falling. Christianity's got a lot of problems, but at least it gave you some kind of a straw to hang on to. So I don't know if that's answering the question or not.
But for yourself, Doug, like you people know you as a libertarian. Is that would you say that's something to do with morality as well, or how do you navigate if you don't have religion, or if someone doesn't have religion? How do they navigate what's right, what's wrong, especially when there's a lot of gray areas in everyday life.
Yeah, that's quite correct. Well, libertarianism, I guess there's a number of ways of just defining libertarianism, but perhaps you can say libertarianism is a belief that things are better when you have free minds, that you don't try to force people what to believe or say, and free markets. You don't try to force people what to do. And of course, the key in libertarianism, using those definitions, is no force, no initiation of force. So yeah, I'm a libertarian. I mean, it's not like I don't believe in self-defense. I absolutely do. But I don't believe in initiating force. And that's a moral question. It's initiating force is destructive and evil and wrong. So yeah, my take on these things does not come from religion. It comes from a philosophical view.
A rational, rational philosophy, right? Rational
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
rational self-interest. One of the problems with the Christian religion is that it says that you're not supposed to be selfish. You're supposed to be altruistic. Love your neighbor. Well, that's bullshit. A lot of neighbors don't deserve love. Love is something that you should earn. It shouldn't be given indiscriminately. If it's given indiscriminately, it devalues it. So I think you should love, or for that matter, even respect, just people that are worthy of love and respect. This is one of the problems with Christianity. There are a lot of others. I mean, once again, if you're going to have a religion, if I was going to choose a religion, I'd probably choose Taoism. But it's not really a religion. It's a philosophical system. It's not a religion, actually. There's
Yep.
nothing you have to believe.
No.
At least I don't think so in Taoism. And then next on the pecking order would be Buddhism, which is unobjectionable, and Christianity. And then you get to Islam, which is the most, dogmatic and pernicious of all the religions in the world. And actually, it's probably the fastest growing in the world as well.
I mean, I think these things come and go, rise and fall, ebb and flow. So it's I know that it also is not a religion, but I like Stoicism as a couple of guideposts, right? To focus on the things you can't control in life and just do the best you can with what you got, and try to align yourself with people that are kindred spirits, essentially.
That's right. Well, the roots of Stoicism, of course, come from the ancient world, when religion wasn't at all the same thing that it has been since the rise of Christianity and then Islam. It's these Abrahamic religions, and I'll include Judaism in that have created more problems than almost anything in the world. So I'm fairly, listen, there's valuable things in all of these religious systems, but generally speaking, I'm not a fan of the Abrahamic religions. None of them.
So, as a libertarian and as a speculator yourself, and I would say a contrarian at that, do you feel that this is sometimes like a mentally taxing or isolating position to be in? Or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, speculators are held in low regard, generally speaking, because most people don't understand what a speculator is. They confuse being a speculator with being a gambler, and they're very, very different things. A gambler takes bets and odds. It's true. Well, a speculator does too. Let me put it this way. Ideally, a speculator is somebody who capitalizes on distortions in the marketplace. Okay? And the main source of distortions in the marketplace is the state, the government. I've been an anarchist for many, many, many years, and I see the state as my personal enemy, but the enemy of civilized society, quite frankly. But on the bright side, the stupid things that the state does, the government does, can create opportunities. Like gold is the classic opportunity, where for many years they suppressed its price to $35 an ounce, while the prices of everything else were rising due to their currency inflation. It presented a huge opportunity for gold, and I took mighty advantage of that during the 1970s. And there are other things that they're doing along those lines all the time. Perhaps not as spectacular, but the trouble is, most people look at Warren Buffett, who's become fabulously wealthy by being a shrewd investor. But what's the difference between an investor and a speculator? Let me put it this way. An investor is somebody who, given a dollar, makes it grow by prudently creating more wealth. So an investor is wonderful. That's not what a speculator does. He capitalizes on distortions in the market, which may not create more wealth at all. So it's a different approach to the world. And I'm afraid in a heavily politicized world, which is making it harder and harder for business to grow and produce wealth, if you have capital, you tend to employ it as a speculator. If government didn't exist, most speculators would be out of work because there would be too few distortions to capitalize on in the market. Not that they're easy to find or always easy to capitalize on, but I try to keep my eye out for them.
But so when you take a position that's like not mainstream, right? Because if there is a distortion in the market, that means very few people know about it. How do you keep your wits about yourself if person after person tells you you're crazy for doing the trade, for example?
Oh, it's stressful because, of course, you always have to. Certainty is a very dangerous thing, and when it comes to investing, I don't like to be too certain. I'm always asking myself, am I sure that I'm right? And I've been wrong plenty of times, and it's been costly. So it's, listen, I wish we lived in a world where you could find a company that's just producing things that people need. The management is competent and honest, and put your extra money into that and have it grow. And that's a world we could live in, theoretically, but we don't. So I don't know how to answer the question.
How do you get through the tough times?
Listen, part of it is your time frame. It's that I see the Western world having deteriorated, obviously and seriously in important ways, not in all ways, but in important ways, for about the last 100 years. It used to be 100 before World War I, put it that way, 110 years ago. Governments only took 5%, maybe 10% at most, of the produce of their subjects. Okay, 5 or 10%, you can kind of live with that drag. But now, governments throughout the Western world take 35, 45, 55, 65% of what people produce. So it's things have been going downhill acceleratingly for the last 100 years. And this gives me kind of a gloomy outlook, because this is a trend that's been in motion for a long time, and it seems to be accelerating, and it will end badly unless something changes. So if you have a kind of a gloomy outlook on things, and lots of things I have a very positive outlook on, I can talk about those too, but it makes you hesitant to make a long-term Warren Buffett style investment.
Well, it appears he's pretty hesitant right now too. He's sitting mostly in cash, I think.
Yeah, that's right. He is hesitant, and a lot of the one of the problems that we have today is that the world is no longer run by capitalism. It's run by fascism. And people say, fascism, what do you mean? Does that mean like Donald Trump, or does that mean like guys in black uniforms with jackboots running around breaking down doors? Well, maybe it does, but the word fascism was coined by Benito Mussolini. And the definition of fascism is a partnership between the state and big business. And that's what the world is like. Small business is being squeezed out with all these regulations because a big company can hire the lawyers, hire the accountants to fight the government off and take advantage of the distortions. But a little guy, it's hard to jump over all the hurdles that are put up there. So fascism is big business combined with big government. And that's where the world is today. And that makes it hard for me to invest.
But then you mentioned earlier, Doug, that you hold gold, for example, and I would say today gold's still seen as sort of a contrarian investment, right? It's not as sexy as, I don't know, buying Apple or Nvidia or whatever the new up and coming thing is. So how do you hold on to gold when everything else seems to be going crazy in price? Nobody else around you is excited about it. Is it because you keep a pulse on how the world's going and that helps you to stay the course in your contrarian investments? Because there's one thing about being a contrarian, it's whether or not other people around you are supporting you in your decision. But there's also that aspect of the price movement, right? If everything else is moving in price and what you're holding on to with both hands is staying flat or even going down, I think it really questions your assertions, right?
Oh, you're absolutely correct. But it depends on your time frame, of course. And ever since I discovered gold, and I discovered it, well, let me see. Going to college and taking economics courses was of zero value. In fact, it was of negative value. But after I misallocated 4 years going to university, I graduated by the skin of my teeth in 1968. And I discovered gold in about 1971, just when it was being devalued by the US government. When I read Harry Browne's book, You Can Profit from the Coming Devaluation, still an excellent book, and Harry became a friend of mine over the years. And after reading the other book that helped a great deal was Henry Hazlitt's book, Economics in One Lesson. Two short but brilliant books. Anyway, so since that time, all my saving was done with gold. Gold has been an excellent speculation from time to time over the last 50 years, because it's been 50 years, a little bit more now. But it's always been a fantastic asset to accumulate because it's money. And look, I started buying gold 50 years ago. It's shocking. And I still have that gold. And it's treated me very well. It's a savings asset. Sometimes it's a good speculation. It's not an investment. Gold is not an investment because it doesn't produce more wealth. That's not its purpose. If you want to invest, you can buy gold mining stocks, but they're not good investments for lots of reasons. That's why Warren Buffett doesn't buy them. I can talk about why they're crappy investments, but occasionally fantastic speculations. So I guess to answer the question, Jason, it's that gold has been very, very good to me, but treating it as an asset and only occasionally as a speculation. And the big thing I've found, having lost a lot of money a number of times, is that the first rule is don't lose money. Keep what you have, because you're going to be an ex-speculator if you get wiped out. So it's like a it's like a solid platform to build on. And sure, it doesn't go anywhere, but that's the point of it. It's an asset.
Doug, you just mentioned Harry Browne. He's also authored the How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, which I'm reading right now based on a recommendation of Adrian Day, actually.
Yeah, fantastic book.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. But what's interesting to me, and maybe you can shed some light on it, because you said you became friends with Harry. He did run, so like in the book, he makes the whole thing about just align with people that are like-minded, stop trying to change other people's opinions and views, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
However, he did try to run for president twice. So I don't understand how those two things go together.
Yeah, well, I think he's, as much as anything else, I mean, one of the hats that Harry wore was being an educator. And when you're educating people, they're not necessarily people that agree with you, but you're trying to instruct them so that, well, like I said, I'm not a Christian, but I like a lot of the things that Jesus said. And one of the things he said, let those who have ears hear. So you say things, and some people with ears will hear. So I think that's the way Harry viewed it. Anyway, he was so pissed off at the stupidity of things that he wanted to do something actively to abolish stupidity.
And that was him putting himself up as a candidate. And it was, I didn't check the timeline, but it was quite a bit later than authoring the book, I think.
Yeah, it was. What are the years that Harry did that? I should know, because I was the largest single contributor to Harry's campaign. At least
I think 96 and 2000, I think.
I think you're right. That's when it was. Yeah, exactly. And I did it not because I believe in politics. And I certainly don't believe in the Libertarian Party, which is really just a little cesspool. That's all it is. It's
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's full of it's full of people that would love to be in a major party, but they're not competent enough to be either Republicans or Democrats, which is a sad testimony to them. I mean, other than Harry, look at some of the people that they've run for offices. I mean, like they ran. What year was this? Johnson, who was the governor of Arizona, and then William Weld, who was a hardcore evil statist, as his vice president. And the Libertarian Party got more votes than it's ever got with those two candidates. You know, a pothead and a deep stater. So, no, I'm not a fan of the Libertarian Party.
Watching some of your content and listening to some of the conversations that you've had, you sometimes allude to a world that gets along somehow without countries, without states in the first place. I wanted to see if we could speculate a little bit, or if you could maybe give us some insights of what that would look like. Like, what would a world without countries, nation states look like, and how would it function?
Well, my ideal would be a world with 8 billion little nation states. But that's not practical because people are social animals. So it'd be better if there's an average of 4 people in a family. There were like 2 billion family nation states. But people have always organized themselves into clans, kind of loosely related to large family groups. And then the clans form up into tribes, which are more loosely related, but share values, culture, ethnicity, language, everything. That's what a tribe does. So it would probably look that way. One book that I'm a big fan of, written by Neil Stephenson, is called Diamond Age, where he explains what he thinks the world might look like in the near future, where nation states still exist, but they're less powerful. And more important, the nation states are files, which are groups of people that are like tribes, sharing values, culture, interests, whatever, but internationally. So You could be part of a file any place in the world, and the electronic media makes it possible to communicate with your files. So I think it might be like that. So that, my loyalty, is my loyalty to the United States government? No. I mean, it's a criminal organization. I like America, but I'm more loyal to my tribe, if you would, my file, people that I share values with. And I don't particularly like to hang out with people who aren't members of that file. Why? Because if they don't share the same ethics, the same morality that I do, they might be dangerous to me. So I want to stay away from them. I mean, they might have criminal proclivities. And I don't want to be around people that might do things that I consider to be aggressive or criminal. So,
Right.
yeah, I guess that's why I'm kind of in a silo, just hanging around with other libertarians, or preferably AnCaps, more than libertarians. Trouble with libertarians, incidentally, is that they like to talk about money and Mises and von Hayek and all these things and have an understanding of economics. But it's strange. Most of them are poor as church mice. This is rather at odds. So most libertarians talk the talk. They don't walk the walk. And anyway, they're too wishy-washy. That's why most of my friends are part of the anarcho-capitalist movement. We actually don't believe in the state and see it as a predator, as an enemy.
That's an interesting point you brought up. So Doug, do you feel like to truly live up to this AnCap philosophy, to really have be self-actualized, I would guess, right, is being financially secure is a really important first step in your evolution? Or
Yes. Charity begins at home.
Mhm.
You've got to look out for number one, as it were. Then look out for your family. Then look out for your friends. Then look out for your associates. That's
So you need to come from a position of security first before you're able to have a firm footing to, influence and help those around you, right?
It's like when you're on an airplane and they tell you how to use the little mask. They say,
help
put it on
yourself
yourself first before you put it on the person next to you. Well, okay, good advice.
And how for our audience, say they're in the, because I want to bring two different questions together. Earlier on, you said, hey, when you were at university or at college, you wasted 4 years of your time, right? So
it was fun. It was fun.
It was fun. But if you were to go back now and say you found yourself to be mid-20s or early 30s, what would some of the really, really big priorities be for you in that time of your life? Like how can you go about building that security for yourself, getting the knowledge you need to have, and to grow in that way that you want to grow? What are some of the rules or philosophies you need to hold on tight to?
Yeah, well, if I ever finish this book or write the book, forget about finish it, about what a young person should do at age 18 instead of going to college, which is, unless you're going to take STEM courses and be a scientist or something like that, is a disastrous waste of time and money. I'll speak to that in detail. But what would I do differently that I've done? I wish that I'd found a helpful mentor, because in walking through life, when I found a fork in the road, I took it, but I didn't have a plan particularly. And so I got to where I am randomly, as opposed to by a well thought out plan in advance. I like to keep reading books, keep gaining knowledge, kept doing things to pick up skills and meet people that if they were engaging in these various sports and so forth, we would tend to think alike or act. But yeah, I wish that I'd had good counsel, which I don't think I ever really had, ever. I mean, it would have helped me. It would have helped me if I had somebody's shoulders to stand on instead of having to reinvent the wheel as I went along. So, but I didn't really, frankly. Well, of course, you pick up people that help you and say things that are helpful, but no mentors. So it would have been nice to have had those, but that's water over the dam.
So likewise, you would recommend that a young person tries to find, identify, connect with a mentor?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah.
If you can find somebody that is admirable, that is virtuous, and I don't mean virtuous in the Christian sense. I mean virtuous in the Roman sense, and make yourself of value to him, so there can be an exchange. Probably wouldn't be an equal exchange. It would mostly be from the mentor to you, but if you make yourself valuable to them, the way in Roman times a client would to a patron, I think that's wise at early in life, certainly.
Wow, nice one. Yeah, it's a good point, right? If you can not need to reinvent the wheel, then you can get on your way a lot further in that time frame before you have to make the next tough decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, having made plenty of stupid mistakes in my life, I think I could have avoided. Well, they say a smart man learns from his mistakes. A smarter man learns from other people's mistakes. Okay, easier said than done. And it's wise if somebody points that out to you and helps you in the path of critical thinking, which is a lost art, I'm afraid.
One of the biggest complaints that I hear from people graduating high school and then college is not even so much that the stuff they learned is useless. It's that it happened without really any regard to where we're trying to end up, right? So there's no like this like academic advisor thing is like not it's just a formality. It's just a box you check, but there's not really any taking inventory of, well, what do you want out of life? What are you good at? What gives you pleasure, and what can you use to actually make money, get rich, right? And so because there's scores of people, I mean, in Germany it's extreme. I don't know about the US as much, but every girl here wants to study psychology because it's interesting. And I'm like, cool, but that's not medicine, right? You're not actually going to be able to treat someone's mind. You're just there talking to them, and that's only if you go all the way with it to a master's or beyond. So then and I don't mean it's derogatory to hairdressers, but then I'm like, just become a hairdresser. You can just talk to people all day if you're a hairdresser, and you can probably make more money doing it. And so every time when young people tell me, he's like, yeah, I want to study psychology. I'm like, why? I just ask them why. What are you going to do with that? And it completely falls apart. And they're like, oh man, you're like against me doing that. I'm like, I'm not. I want you to know why you want to do it, right? And it's so sad that the institutions already fall apart at that step. They don't even like, yeah, you can study anything here. And so like my thing is, I think you can learn valuable things at universities, especially if you go to a good one. But you have to know what you're there for in the first place, right? For that to be meaningful. Yeah.
No, I think you're quite correct. And what you said about psychology, I think is quite true. People are looking for a way to understand the way the mind works. But I don't think psychology courses are the way to do that at all. And people go to psychologists to get counsel, but I think that's among the worst places to get counsel. And if you go to a psychiatrist, that is like 10 times worse than going to a psychologist, because psychiatrists today are very heavily indoctrinated as a specialty. And they think, most of them, that the way to solve the problem is by passing out psychoactive pills of one type or another. So the whole thing is, it's messed up. And the same as sociology, which is a study of how to essentially manipulate other people, or political science, which, I mean, that's crazy. That's studying how
Even
government work. I mean,
even the name of political science is already a deception, right?
it's not a science at all. It's no only reason to go to college. I mean, look, you should read lots of books on all these subjects. Instead of studying political science, you should just read history books. That's much wiser. Forget, just shit can the idea of political science and read history books if you want to find out about these things. And if you want to go to college, I mean, you're paying a lot of money to read books, and then what? You should, if you're going to go to college, you should take lab courses, chemistry, physics, mathematics, engineering, things of that type. That's where you need a formal discipline and a structured environment, okay? You don't need that, or frankly, even want it for literature and other soft subjects.
No, I agree. Yeah, so my background is engineering, so that's why I'm like, I learned a ton there, but I also knew going in what I wanted out of it. So that's, so I think it can work, but yeah, you need to know what you're there for.
Yeah, exactly. Plus the fact that today in academia, wokeism dominates. People with all kinds of bizarre ideas about how the world works, and you hang out with people that teach these things and people that are taught these things, and you almost can't help but absorb them, which is deleterious.
So you've touched briefly on the value of friendship and coming across people in different cultures, different ideologies, and you've moved around a lot, lived in different places. What would you say are the keys to building genuine friendships, especially also with people that you're not necessarily share the same space with? So you're not in the same place, right? Because you move around quite a bit. How do you stay in touch?
Well, this has certainly been facilitated by the internet and by telecommunications making almost anybody in the world a free telephone call away. I mean, it's really rather marvelous. You don't have to have pen pals anymore where the letters take weeks to be delivered and all this type of thing. So that's all very good. I'm a big I'm a huge lover of technology, even though I can barely use my computer. I can use probably a tenth of 1% of its capabilities, but that's okay. I mean, I get what I want out of my computer, and it facilitates meeting other people. As far as what kind of people I want to meet, the most important thing is their character. And their character is what they believe is right and wrong, and then what they do to put their beliefs into practice. So that's number one. If you surround yourself with, unreliable people who lie, cheat, and steal, they will f you up. There's no question about it. So just stay away from them. I mean, I've run into lots of those kind of people, and it never ends well. It just never ends well. So it's nice to have met them, nice to have known them on a superficial level, but that's it. So that's the thing. It's mainly the character of a person that I'm interested in. And if it's buttressed by knowledge and experience, then, well, that's fantastic. You've hit the jackpot.
So, I mean, you've definitely managed to build community, I would say, of people, like-minded people. I know you have the International Man blog that I think you created, but you're not the only person contributing to it, as far as I can see.
No.
Do you have any advice like, so if Jason and I, for example, are trying to, form our own tribe of people that love freedom, possibly libertarian minded or AnCaps, what would you say? Like, what's the number one thing to do to build a community?
Well, I think you want to put yourself in a position where you have done something. Well, let me put it this way. The three most important verbs in any and every language are be, do, and have. Okay? And most people emphasize the verb have. I want a girlfriend. I want to have a nice house. I want to have a nice job. Well, okay, that's all very well and good. But to have things is a consequence of doing things. And people forget that. So I guess the answer to the question is you have to do things that will distinguish you. And having things are ideally, as Catholics like to say, an outward sign of inward grace. If you got all this great stuff, what have you done to get it? Well, unless you stole it, you've produced something. And if you've done things, then maybe you actually are something besides. So I tend to look at things through the filter of those three verbs, and people, unfortunately, mostly just look at the have part. They want all this crap, and they forget you got to do stuff to get it. Hopefully, honest stuff, and then maybe, if you're lucky, you'll be something besides. That's going to be one of the themes of this book, which may or may not get written. I guess it'll get written. It's just hard work, and I've gotten lazy. I don't like to do hard work. That's one thing when I talked to Harry, Harry Browne, is that, Harry said that as he got older, he got lazier. And I didn't quite understand that then because I never thought of Harry as being lazy. But by God, I feel lazier as I get older because my necessity level is lower than it used to be.
Well, Doug, thanks, man. That was so good. The three verbs. I've never heard it put that way, and it's cuts to the chase and clarifies things. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile thought. Yeah,
So,
thank you.
so similar on the doing part, is there any things that you've done that you would regret? And I'm not strictly like in the speculation world, but like life choices.
Oh yeah. Well, that song.
Anything that you would want to share, let's say.
Yeah, sure. Done all kinds of things that wouldn't be worth sharing because they're just too stupid or too embarrassing. But it's like that song. I guess Frank Sinatra made it popular. It's My Way. Although I've got to say, Nina Simone, who is my favorite vocalist, male or female, sang it better than Frank did. It's, regrets, I have a few. But then again, too few to mention. And it's not worth mentioning them anyway. So, I don't know.
Well, put it another way.
The mistakes, listen, the mistakes you make that you really regret insofar are moral mistakes. They're not technical mistakes or financial mistakes. Yeah, you can regret those, but it's moral mistakes. Those are what you really have to live with, where you did the wrong thing because you lacked courage, you lacked fortitude.
How about with your current beliefs? Like, say you identify, hey, I'm an AnCap, I'm a libertarian, but how did you get there? Like, how did your beliefs change along the way? Like, if you were to take snapshots in time from when you were 30, 40, 50, and now, what would some of the bigger changes be in let's say your belief systems over the years, or have you been consistent throughout, you think?
Well, kind of. There's this argument of, is it nature or is it nurture, the way people are? And I'm a nature guy because as far as I can tell, I was always exactly who I am. My nature was always the same. And it was just grasping knowledge and information helped me to consolidate that nature. So I'm a nature, not a nurture guy. And of course, as I said, I grew up in the Catholic Church, which I never liked. But after I got out of that, the first, I think, important book that I read is I read a series of essays by H.L. Mencken, and I absolutely just really liked the way Mencken thought. And the first political book I read was Barry Goldwater's Conscience of a Conservative. And I read that book and I thought, well, I've got to be a conservative because that all makes sense. And it did until I read Ayn Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness, which I read when I was about 22, something like that, 23. And then I became an objectivist, a Randite for a while. But, I love Ayn Rand and her thoughts, but her followers are very dogmatic. In fact, people that identify as Randites or as objectivists are just painful. It's like a secular religion is what it is. But the book that really crystallized everything for me, in addition to those, was Morris and Linda Tannehill's book, The Market for Liberty. I don't know if you guys have read that or not.
No, I haven't. I actually haven't even heard of that one. The Market
Interesting.
for Liberty. Okay.
Yes, it's on the internet. If you Google it, I think you can download it. And it's kind of interesting that I was given that book by somebody when it was in samizdat form. There were only 500 copies of it printed very cheaply. And I referenced that book very strongly in the back of my second book, which was a really big bestseller. That was called Crisis Investing. And the bookstore that I referenced, where people could get these books that I mentioned in the back of that Crisis Investing book, got thousands of requests for The Market for Liberty, but it was out of print. So they put it back in print, and they asked me to write the foreword for the book. And that's kind of a Back to the Future thing, where I get to write the foreword, kind of.
To the book that influenced your book.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very strange. You write the foreword for the book that influenced you after the fact. It's kind of a reversal of the time train. And for what it's worth, that book, I gave it. There was a friend of mine, he still is, here in Argentina, named Jorge Truco, and I bought a piece of real estate from him in Patagonia, in the Lake District. And Jorge and I were friendly. We'd go out to dinner every night, talk about philosophy and politics, and I explained these concepts to him. And he was sympathetic, but couldn't wrap his head around it. So I said, "Look, Jorge, why don't you read this book, The Market for Liberty?" I didn't have a copy, but by God, he got a copy of it. And he read it. He liked it so much, it transformed his thinking, as it did mine, and he translated it into Spanish. Now it's El Mercado para Libertad. And it turned out that he was friends with Javier Milei. And he gave a copy of it, the translated copy, because Milei kind of speaks English, but he speaks English about the way I speak Spanish. That's not really good. And apparently, and I'll have to confirm this, that Millet became an AnCap after reading that book. I'll find out from the horse's mouth, but that's what Jorge says.
Cool. That's
What a story.
powerful chain of events, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like the old Clairol hair commercial. One girl tells another.
That's how is what are the first signs that you can tell with Milei in power? Just because you're geographically so close and you spend a lot of time in Argentina. Any comments you'd like to make on that?
Oh, it's working. Inflation has come down from, it was only a year ago that if you went out on the street and wanted to buy stuff, you had to carry a stack of oh, Jesus. The currency's changed here so often. The first time I came to Argentina in like 1979, people had stacks, and I mean stacks of currency on their desks, and it was so inconvenient and so stupid. And they've gone through, let's see, how many currencies? Well, at least one since then. That peso is totally out of existence. So even a year ago, you needed a stack of, were they 100 peso or 1,000 peso notes? Because now a 1,000 peso note is worth about $1. And inflation was running away at 20% or more per month. But now it's down to 2% or less per month, headed towards zero, and it will reach zero, I believe. So he's done that. He's fired thousands, not just thousands, scores of thousands of government employees, abolished lots of regulations and rules and price controls and all that stuff. And it's quite amazing the progress that he's made so far, considering that the deep state in Argentina, which is really entrenched, and the unions and all this type of thing have been fighting him tooth and nail because you're breaking their rice bowls. So I'm convinced that if he stays in office for the rest of his term, another 3 years, he'll be reelected, and Argentina will be transformed.
Interesting.
And that's pretty good, because I own a lot of stuff in Argentina, a lot of real estate, which has been an albatross around my neck for years, frankly, financially. But I think that what's going to happen is, because Argentina is basically so sound. I mean, it's the 7th largest country in the world, or is it the 8th, 7th or 8th, with only 40 million people. Once you get outside of Buenos Aires, where about a third of the population lives in the area around BA, the country's empty. It's just delightful. And I think that you're going to find not just thousands, but tens of thousands of Europeans, the right kind of Europeans, freedom-seeking, wealthy Europeans, are going to pile into Argentina, frankly. It's going to happen. And they will accelerate, with any luck, the trend. So I'm quite optimistic about Argentina.
That's good to hear. This is the most optimistic I think you've been on a political topic that we've touched on.
On a political topic, yeah. I know I'm optimistic about, as long as we don't have World War III in the next little while, a year or two or something, a number of ways that could happen. And it's not unlikely. That'll set things back by, Herman Kahn, who I got to know, and you guys don't know who Herman Kahn is, I presume.
I don't know.
Herman Kahn, did you ever see the movie Dr. Strangelove?
Yes.
Okay, it's a genius movie. It's one of my very famous, it's a black comedy, which is the best kind of comedies, I think. And so Herman Kahn wrote these books. He wrote a number of books, but the most important ones from this point of view were Thinking the Unthinkable, which is about nuclear war, and another book called On Thermonuclear War. And so I got to know Herman, went out with him a number of times before he died. And he was kind of the intellectual model for Dr. Strangelove himself, but he was a jolly fat man. So if we don't have global thermonuclear war, which is entirely possible with these criminal personalities that are running all the European governments and are still running the U.S. government, And Trump will hopefully be a step in the right direction. I think so. We'll see. As long as we don't do that, Herman used to say, well, even if we had a nuclear war, and he was writing about back in the 60s and 70s, and the technology has changed a lot since then. I don't know if you guys read my last article on internationalman.com. It was on nuclear war and the chances of that.
It's not the one about making the crisis your friend?
No, the last one that's probably the one that's just been published today.
I don't think it's out yet.
Published last week I think it was called On the Prospects for Nuclear War.
Yeah, I read it, yeah. I don't remember every word, but I read it.
Well, one of the things Herman said back in those days when the technology was different than it is today is that, well, even if we had a global thermonuclear war back then, when they were using big bombs, and they're not going to use big bombs anymore, the world would recover in 30 years.
Right, yeah, because the modern rockets are much more maneuverable, so you can hit targets more precisely, etc.
And therefore use smaller weapons with less collateral damage.
Did you see on that topic? Did you see the latest? Like I think 2 weeks ago, there was a hypersonic attack in Ukraine where there was this new type of missile fired.
Yeah,
and I read quite a bit about people saying that would change the way wars will be fought because there's so much energy in those high speed projectiles, right? But there's not really any collateral damage, so you can really focus that damage on what you want to. Yeah,
because that new Russian missile, you don't really. This is unclear to me, and it's strange. It shouldn't be unclear to me because I'm on a Zoom call every week with a number of guys that are ex-military types and real experts on weapons and nuclear stuff. I mean, they really are. They know this stuff. And it's even unclear to them exactly how this missile would work because we're talking about something moving at Mach 20. And it's a MIRV weapon, which in its case, 6 sub-weapons, munitions are released and independently targetable. And of course, if something is moving at Mach 20 when it hits, I mean, the damage is huge, even if it's not nuclear. But it's really unclear to me whether that's really going to change the game or not. I don't know. I don't know. It's unclear to me from talking to guys that know about it. It's unclear to them exactly what it is. So I don't know. Is the answer a little bit confusing at the moment?
I'm not sure if we want to know. Maybe if we keep being in the dark, maybe that's a good thing because it'll mean that it's not been used too often.
Well, listen, that's a good reason to be in the Southern Hemisphere where there are very few targets worth hitting. So they're not going to bother hitting them for that reason. And if it goes full scale nuclear, the weather system down here is more or less separated from the weather system in the Northern Hemisphere. So you're somewhat insulated. So that's all the more reason to be down here. A lot of other advantages to being here. For instance, down here, I can have a staff with a maid and a cook and all that stuff. I couldn't have that stuff if I lived in the U.S. Forget about it. It would be outrageously expensive, and so you can do that. You can really live pretty well down here in South America.
I think in Europe here, even if you had the money.
Well,
no, sorry, I was just going to say in Europe, if you had the money, you'd probably still not want to do it because you'd be so badly judged. It'd be something morally horrendous to have a cook or a maid.
You'd be considered totally anti-democratic in Europe. But that's the nice thing about the Orient. I mean, you can do that in the Orient and it's accepted. It's fine.
Yeah, we have a housekeeper. My wife and I have a housekeeper, and it's tolerated because we have small children. So that's why
Oh,
people are like, okay, well, that makes sense.
yeah.
But if we
Not
didn't
like
have that,
it's any of their business. Where do you live?
well, I split time evenly between Texas, Dallas, Texas, and a small town outside of Frankfurt. Actually, I'm really close to the Ramstein Air Base, U.S. Air Force Base. So this is when I'm in Germany.
It's not a good place to live if
That
things
is
get.
not. No, that's really not great.
Why do you bother living in Germany at all anymore? I mean, the way that country's going, it's not good.
So transitioning is a long process because I have both aging grandparents and all my family is here, and I like to help out. I want them to have part in my really young kids' life, so that's the big emotional reasons why. But then really everything business related and pretty much the future more or less is definitely in the US. However, beyond that, I really think that we're going to go south. And I've actually been learning Spanish for a long time. No particular reason. My wife always asks me, like, why do you want to learn Spanish so bad? And I'm like, I don't know. I just think it'll come in useful at some point.
Yeah, yeah. It's
We'll see.
it's a worthwhile language to learn. The first language I learned on my own, and I didn't learn it very well, and the easiest language for an English
pretty
speaker
easy.
to learn is German, frankly, because first 500 words are all cognates, so it's not hard to speak basic German. But then I learned French reasonably well. Took it in school, and then I lived a year in Switzerland and France, and that really helped. But Spanish is the best language to learn, I think, as a second language, unless you can live in the Orient. And it's nice to know Mandarin, of course, but you can't be everywhere or no. But Richard Burton, and by that I mean the 19th century explorer, not the actor that died a decade ago. It was said, the way he was described is he spoke 10 languages fluently and 15 more reasonably well. And I think the distinction that they would have had in those days between fluent and reasonably well is, I think, rather telling.
I'm sure reasonably well in those days was better than 4 years of college in most languages.
Yeah, vastly better. Exactly. What we consider just about fluent today.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's like a non-native English speaker being able to fully digest Shakespeare or something. It's like, oh, I struggle with Shakespeare. It's like, well, your grasp on the language is not that good.
Right. That's right. Well, 100 years ago, high schools in the U.S. used to teach Latin as well as Greek. So things have become degraded.
Changed
And
quite a bit.
I understand, although I can't testify to this, is that now college students have to take remedial reading even.
Yeah.
So things have become degraded in lots of ways.
So, last big question, I guess, for today that I have for you is the future of speculation. There's a lot going on in the digital world, right? There's all kinds of cryptocurrencies, and even if we just focus on the one, that the king, which is Bitcoin, what do you make of that? And I mean, all these digital trends, like AI, is going crazy right now, and I've read in one of your articles how. Well, actually, never mind. I don't want to mix too many things. Just speculation in the digital world. Do you have any commentary on Bitcoin, etc.?
Well, I was always philosophically aligned to Bitcoin, and idiotically, when it was promoted to me in Argentina, by a Belgian guy. I bought him lunch, and he gave me a physical Bitcoin, and I put it in my safe deposit box. I got to look and see if it has the codes around it, and if I can actually translate it into a digital Bitcoin. But I actually had physical ones, I guess. But so I was always philosophically aligned with it, but I didn't understand the value of Bitcoin. I said, okay, if you use Aristotle's characteristics of a sound money, durable, yes. Divisible, yes. Convenient, yes. Consistent, yes. But what's the use value of it? So you don't get stuck with nothing. And it took me a while to figure out that it's actually a perfect transfer mechanism, certainly in today's world, which is becoming increasingly computer-oriented. So it will compete with gold for a lot of reasons. And so that was in 2017. I got involved in Bitcoin. And I think it's going a lot higher. As far as the other 20,000 or 40,000 or however many there are altcoins, it's unclear to me what use they are, like Dogecoin or Doggy Coin, if you would. It started out as a joke, and it has absolutely no use whatsoever. It's worth absolutely nothing. It's like those memes of dogs that people were spending huge amounts of money for. It's the market's entirely too frothy in everything. So I guess the answer to the question is, although I gave some money to Marco Witzer. Do you know Marco? Oh, so he's a Bitcoin. One of these, at this point, fairly numerous, but also very smart Bitcoin geniuses. And he buys all these crap coins, or shit coins, as they call them, and they go up and down, and he trades them and all that. So he's managing some money for me. And last I heard, it's gone 7-1, that account I've got with him. So I think Marco ought to give me my money back, and then he can piss away the rest of the money. So, but answer to the question, I think Bitcoin is going to survive and go higher. I don't know about any of these other coins. The market is very bubbly, and people have way too much money, and it's like the stock market. So I don't want any part of it. When I want to speculate today, I speculate in crappy little mining stocks. I think they're going to once again have their day in the sun. They're very, very, very cheap right now. And if you want metals and other chemical goods, you got to mine them. And there's going to be a dearth. Anyway, I think the public's going to get involved in these things. And I think the whole group could go 10-1 over the next few years. We'll see. Famous last words, maybe.
Good. Well, on that note, Jason, do you have another burning question you want to ask Doug?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, we've covered quite a lot of ground. Doug, thank you so much for the time spent and for being so open with us. I think we had a lot of fun. For people that know you, they know you already, and they'll know where to go to get the stuff you create and put out. But for those that do not know you yet, where would you suggest they go to find out about what you're doing?
Well, if they've stuck with us for the last hour and a half, they're probably interested. So there's 3 things I'd refer them to. Number 1 is internationalman.com, where I write an article every week, and 4 other guys also write articles, and they're all excellent, all really excellent. That's number 1. Number 2 is on YouTube. I have a podcast with Matt Smith called Doug Casey's Take. And number 3 is I have 3 novels that are out with my co-author, John Hunt, Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin, as we trace the evolution of our hero, Charles Knight, as he proceeds through increasingly politically incorrect occupations. Next will be terrorist, which I presume will get written. And then it gets more radical after that. So those are fun reads. They're well-written novels. They're pretty good, if I do say so myself. So you should go on Amazon and buy those.
Okay. We'll put them all in our show notes. So even those that did not make it all the way with us for the whole hour and a half, they'll still see it at the bottom.
Okay. Seems to me that we built momentum, and probably the best is at the last, but that's okay. Just the hardcore people stuck with those.
Those are the valuable ones.
Yeah,